You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Port security refers to the set of controls that govern how devices connect to and communicate across network ports. In simple terms, ports are the doorways into a switch or router, and without rules, any device could connect and begin transmitting traffic. This lack of restriction creates a potential entry point for malicious or unauthorized systems. Port security measures enforce rules about who and what can use these entry points, often checking characteristics such as a device's hardware address or authentication status. By securing ports, organizations reduce the risk of rogue devices gaining access to sensitive segments of a network, creating a first line of defense in access control. At the switch level, many protections can be applied to restrict connections. One common method is port security with MAC binding, which allows only specified devices with known hardware addresses to use a given port. Sticky MAC rules extend this idea by dynamically learning the first device that connects and binding it to the port until changed by an administrator. This makes it harder for unauthorized devices to join the network unnoticed. For example, if an attacker plugs a laptop into an open port in a conference room, sticky MAC rules would block the connection, unless the switch recognized it as pre-approved. The IEEE 802.1x standard provides a formalized way to authenticate devices before granting network access. Unlike simple MAC checks, which can be spoofed, 802.1x requires devices to present credentials, such as certificates or user credentials, to an authentication server. This process occurs before the device can pass traffic, ensuring that only authorized endpoints join the network. For instance, a company-issued laptop may be authenticated using a digital certificate, while an unmanaged personal device would be denied or redirected to a guest VLAN. This framework shifts control from the physical layer to an authentication layer, greatly enhancing the reliability of access decisions. Authentication protocols such as Remote Authentication, Dial-In User Service, Radius, and Terminal Access Controller, Access Control System Plus, TACACS Plus, provide centralized methods for validating identities. Instead of managing user accounts locally on each switch or router, organizations use these protocols to connect devices to a central authentication server. Radius is widely used for network access, while TACACS Plus often governs administrative access. By centralizing control, administrators gain consistency and visibility, ensuring that access decisions follow organizational policy. For example, a revoked account in the directory immediately applies across all devices, preventing lingering local accounts from being exploited. In networking contexts, it is important to distinguish between device authentication and user authentication. Device authentication ensures that the hardware itself is permitted to join the network, often through MAC binding or certificates. User authentication validates the human operator's identity, commonly through usernames, passwords, or multi-factor credentials. Both are necessary, but they serve different purposes. For instance, a secure office may require that only company laptops connect to the corporate LAN, device authentication, while also demanding that employees log in using their unique accounts, user authentication. This layered approach ensures that both the endpoint and the operator are trusted. The management plane of devices interfaces such as Secure Shell, SSH, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, HTTPS, and Application Programming Interfaces, APIs, also requires protection. These channels allow administrators to configure and monitor appliances, but they are also attractive targets for attackers. Leaving management interfaces exposed without restrictions could allow remote compromise of critical infrastructure. Best practices include restricting access to dedicated management networks, requiring multi-factor authentication and encrypting sessions. For example, using HTTPS for web-based management instead of unencrypted HTTP ensures credentials are not intercepted. Protecting management planes secures the very tools administrators rely on to enforce other network protections. Access control lists, ACLs, and port-based filtering further refine security by restricting which traffic types are permitted on specific interfaces. An ACL might specify that only traffic bound for a particular service, such as HTTPS on port 443, is allowed while all others are denied. This minimizes the attack surface by reducing exposure to unnecessary or insecure services. Port-based filtering can also restrict traffic between VLANs, ensuring that only approved communications flow between segments. For instance, a database server might only accept queries from an application server VLAN, blocking all other attempts. This fine-grained control helps enforce segmentation and limit lateral movement. One common threat against port-level security is MAC spoofing, where an attacker forges the hardware address of a trusted device to gain access. This technique undermines simple MAC binding by impersonating an approved endpoint. Mitigation strategies include enabling 802.1x authentication, limiting the number of MAC addresses a port can learn, and enabling port security violations that automatically shut down a suspicious port. For example, if a port configured to accept only one device suddenly sees multiple addresses, the switch can disable the port to stop the attack. These measures ensure that spoofing attempts are detected and contained before damage occurs. Virtual Local Area Networks (VLANs) and private VLANs provide logical segmentation to reduce lateral movement within networks. By dividing a physical network into smaller logical groups, VLANs isolate traffic so that only devices within the same group can communicate directly. Private VLANs extend this by further restricting communication between devices in the same VLAN, allowing administrators to segment even more granularly. For example, servers in a shared hosting environment may reside in the same VLAN, but be isolated from one another to prevent cross-contamination. VLAN segmentation creates internal boundaries, ensuring that one compromised device cannot easily pivot across the network. Monitoring and logging are vital components of port security, providing visibility into connection attempts and authentication results. Logs capture events such as port violations, failed 802.1x authentications, or attempts to spoof MAC addresses. By feeding this information into monitoring platforms, administrators can detect suspicious behavior in real time and investigate incidents after the fact. For example, repeated failed authentication attempts on a single port may signal an attacker trying to brute force credentials. Without logging, these signs would go unnoticed, leaving vulnerabilities unaddressed. Effective monitoring ensures port security controls are not just passive rules, but actively enforced and observed protections. Physical protections for ports remain important, because not all threats are digital. Lockable port covers, secure patch panels, and controlled access to wiring closets and switch rooms prevent attackers from plugging in unauthorized devices. For example, a malicious insider might try to connect a rogue access point to an open port, creating a hidden wireless network. Simple physical barriers can prevent this, ensuring only authorized staff can access critical infrastructure. These measures align with the principle that cybersecurity must also account for physical security, as control of physical interfaces often equates to control of the network itself. Ultimately, port security is a fundamental part of network defense in depth. It combines technical measures such as MAC binding, 802.1x authentication, ACLs, and VLANs with physical controls and monitoring. Each layer addresses a different angle of potential attack, ensuring that even if one measure fails, others remain in place to block or detect intrusions. For example, if an attacker bypasses MAC binding through spoofing, VLAN segmentation and ACLs can still restrict lateral movement. Port security is not a single tool, but a collection of practices that reinforce each other, forming a resilient perimeter at the very edge of network access. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Radius and TACHACS Plus are two widely used authentication protocols, but they differ in scope and function. Radius or Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service was originally designed for network access authentication and is often used to validate user logins through 802.1x or VPNs. It provides authentication and authorization, but it combines them into a single process, making detailed command control less flexible. TACACS Plus, or Terminal Access Controller Access Control System Plus, by contrast, separates authentication, authorization, and accounting into distinct steps. This allows granular control, such as permitting one administrator to view configurations while restricting another to read-only status. Conceptually, Radius excels at endpoint access, while TACACS Plus shines in device administration. The Extensible Authentication Protocol (EAP) supports various methods within the 802.1x framework, each with different security strengths. EAPMD5, one of the simplest, provides only basic password authentication and is considered weak by modern standards. EAPTLS, on the other hand, uses digital certificates, providing strong mutual authentication between client and server. EAPTTLS and PEAP offer compromises by tunneling passwords within secure channels, balancing security with manageability. For example, enterprises often choose EAPTLS for corporate laptops to enforce certificate-based trust, while guest networks may use PEAP for simplicity. Understanding these methods helps organizations select protocols that balance user convenience, administrative complexity, and security requirements. Certificate-based network authentication offers strong advantages over shared secrets like passwords. Certificates are harder to steal, can be centrally managed, and provide assurance of both device and user identity. For example, a corporate-issued laptop might contain a client certificate signed by the organization's certificate authority. When connecting to the network, the laptop presents this certificate, and only if it is valid does the system grant access. Unlike passwords, certificates cannot be easily guessed or phished, and revocation lists allow quick invalidation of compromised devices. This form of authentication greatly reduces reliance on human memory and strengthens overall trust in network access. Guest access presents unique challenges, requiring a balance between usability and security. Captive portals are a common solution, redirecting guests to a web page where they agree to terms or enter temporary credentials before gaining limited access. Another approach is network segmentation, where guests are placed into a restricted VLAN that isolates them from internal resources. For instance, visitors in a corporate office may have internet access through a guest VLAN but no visibility into the corporate LAN. These methods ensure guests remain productive without introducing unnecessary risk, keeping core resources safe while accommodating temporary or unmanaged devices. Dynamic VLAN assignment and policy-based access expand network access control by tailoring connectivity to individual users or devices. Instead of assigning a fixed port to a single VLAN, the system uses authentication results to determine which VLAN a user should join. For example, employees might be placed into a secure internal VLAN, while contractors are assigned to a restricted VLAN with limited permissions. Network Access Control (NAC) solutions can enforce these rules automatically, ensuring that security policies follow users no matter where they connect. This dynamic approach increases flexibility while enforcing consistent security across large, distributed environments. Automated remediation helps organizations enforce posture checks, ensuring connecting devices meet baseline requirements before full access is granted. If a device fails, it may be placed into a quarantine VLAN or given limited access until updated. For example, a laptop missing a recent security patch might be redirected to a remediation network where it can download updates before joining the production VLAN. This approach minimizes the risk of compromised or unpatched devices introducing vulnerabilities. Automated remediation makes compliance seamless, shifting the burden away from users and ensuring security standards are upheld consistently across the network. Securing the transport of authentication traffic is essential because credentials and tokens must not be exposed in transit. Protocols like Radius often run over UDP, which historically lacked strong protection, but modern deployments encapsulate traffic within secure tunnels, such as Datagram Transport Layer Security (DTLS) or Transport Layer Security (TLS). This prevents attackers from intercepting or modifying authentication requests. For example, in a wireless environment, securing Radius traffic with TLS ensures that user passwords or certificate exchanges are not visible to attackers monitoring the network. Protecting the pathway is just as important as protecting the credentials themselves. Periodic reauthentication and session timeouts reduce the risks posed by stale or hijacked sessions. Without these measures, a device that was once authenticated could remain connected indefinitely, even if the user departs or the device is compromised. Reauthentication requires the client to prove its identity again after a set interval, ensuring ongoing legitimacy. Session timeouts automatically terminate idle sessions, reducing exposure. For instance, a VPN connection might be set to reauthenticate every hour, and inactive logins might be dropped after 15 minutes of inactivity. These practices ensure access is continuously validated rather than granted indefinitely. Integrating NAC events into Security Information and Event Management (SIEM) systems enhances incident response by providing visibility into authentication activity. A SIM can correlate failed logins, port security violations, and posture check results with other security events across the enterprise. For example, repeated authentication failures from multiple ports might be correlated with firewall alerts showing suspicious external traffic, suggesting a coordinated attack. Feeding port security and authentication logs into SIEM platforms ensures these frontline defenses are not isolated but contribute to the broader security intelligence ecosystem, allowing faster detection and response to threats. Credential lifecycle management is a critical element of authentication security. Administrator and device accounts must be carefully created, maintained, rotated, and eventually revoked when no longer needed. Stale credentials present serious risks, as attackers often exploit forgotten accounts. Regular reviews ensure only active users and devices retain access. For example, when an employee leaves an organization, their credentials must be promptly deactivated to prevent unauthorized re-entry. Rotating shared secrets and ensuring unique credentials also strengthen defenses. Proper lifecycle practices transform credentials from static liabilities into dynamic, well-managed security assets that evolve with organizational needs. Testing port security policies is essential to verify that legitimate devices are not inadvertently blocked while attackers are kept out. Organizations must simulate common scenarios, such as plugging in unauthorized devices, spoofing MAC addresses, or using expired certificates to confirm that security rules behave as intended. Equally important is ensuring business continuity. Authorized users should not face frequent disruptions. For instance, a policy that mistakenly locks out a large group of employees due to overly strict rules can cause more harm than good. Testing ensures a balance between security enforcement and operational practicality, fine-tuning controls to serve both goals. Port security and authentication protocols ultimately form the backbone of a trustworthy network. They enforce rules at the point of entry, ensuring only trusted devices and users gain access, and they provide continuous monitoring and validation to maintain trust throughout the session. When combined with strong lifecycle management, secure transport, and integration into incident response, these measures create a resilient environment. They embody the principle of defense in depth, addressing not just who can connect, but how connections are maintained, observed, and controlled. By weaving port security into everyday operations, organizations create networks that are both accessible and secure. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.